one of the favorite agents that I've built for myself. It was only 15 words of instructions, and it's basically the user's not interested in any positive feedback. Just give critical feedback. That's it. You should think about it more like we're learning word processors versus a typewriter. It's a new thing. It's a new way of working. The AI simply cannot process 10,000 documents at once. Not Gemini, not ChatGPT. Nobody's AI can process 10,000 documents. It is a search problem. Because if you don't start until 2030, it's going to be too late, right? Your competitors, they'll be 30%, 50%, 100% more productive than you.
Hey everyone, I'm Samuel Boulanger, and this is Mastering AI with the Experts. If you're trying to actually get stuff done with AI, this podcast is for you. No fluff, no hype, just real conversations with people building the future. Today, I'm joined by Abram Jackson. He's the guy leading Copilot agents and extensibility at Microsoft. And honestly, this conversation just clicked. We went deep on how we actually use AI. We talked about what makes a good agent, why clarity beats complexity, and how adoption really happens, one habit at a time. If you want to support the show, the best way is just to subscribe and maybe send it to someone who's figuring this stuff out too. And if you're into it, check out the newsletter on Substack called Mastering AI for Productivity. Now, let's get into it. Hello, Abram. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I'm a big fan. I'm following you on LinkedIn. I'm following your blog posts, your podcast. I will put all the link to all those different assets in the note description. But thank you so much for joining us today to talk about AI, to talk about agents. Can you please start by introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm very happy to be here, Samuel. Thanks for inviting me onto your show. My name's Abram Jackson. I am a product manager working on Microsoft 365 Copilot. My job is agents, third-party agents and extensibility and extending Copilot to use agents. That is my job. It's what I've been doing, kind of since the start of Microsoft's Copilot journey.
In preparing for this podcast, I read through a lot of your articles. I think I pretty much read all of them. It's very, very instructive. It's gold for me. You're covering a lot of subject we will discuss today. A question I get a lot from our customer. But I like to first start with, you stated that you spend a lot of your career thinking about how human and AI can work together more efficiently and more intelligently. So can you expand on that? What's the story on how you first started working with agent and with AI in general?
Yeah. Well, I started at Microsoft working on the Microsoft Exchange server, the backends, hosting huge amounts of data very reliably. I kind of got into big data systems and architectures at that time. In 2016, I got the opportunity to lead a brand new effort inside of Microsoft to build an AI platform for our internal AI development for features in Microsoft 365. So you'll see some of those features still today. These started back in 2016, but things like Smart Reply, or especially on your mobile, you can just hit a button and it'll give you a potential response that considers things that you say, what the message is, and so on. We built a lot of those products on the platform. So I worked on that for 5 years, and I really got the bug, I guess, for really improving user productivity through this AI, more than we could just do with traditional software. But we also really struggled in order to really move the needle very much. There's some useful features that kind of sat along the edges, and you might like some of them, and others are maybe just kind of annoying and don't help you very much. So we tried a lot of things, a lot of different features, but when ChatGPT came out, some folks at Microsoft, some of our executives, realized, oh, this is what we were missing. And I can see it too, that with generative AI and large language models starting with 3.5 and 3.5 Turbo and ChatGPT would really make new scenarios incredibly valuable. So I pretty quickly moved over from my team in our internal AI platform that was really turned into like, is more traditional machine learning and huge number crunching and stuff like that, of training custom models for individual scenarios, to using this new foundation model, GPT 3.5, in different places. And in particular, within Copilot. The place that I got started inside of Microsoft 365 Copilot was in extensibility. We didn't know what that was. About 2 weeks into the job, we decided to go show some things on stage of use developers adding things to Copilot. So this was back in 2023. Yeah, 2023. I've been leading the space since then, through plugins and graph connectors and now agents. Now the team is pretty large, and I get to focus on the cool things, the parts that I find cool and are going to really increase that productivity, I hope, for all of the world's knowledge workers, keyboard warriors going forward.
Great. What's your favorite use case? Using with AI in general. I won't necessarily specifically focus on Copilot, even if I think that it will probably be a Copilot feature. But what's your favorite use case?
My favorite use case, I've got to say, is just thinking with AI partner. And you can do this with humans sometimes. And I think of this, I call this the co-founder model, where you can imagine yourself at a startup, right? It's just you and one other person, and you've got different skills. Maybe you're the technical person, the other person's the business person, right? But you've both got ideas about the product direction. And so, you're sitting next to each other, for 12 hours a day, working on the thing, the product, whatever it is, and you're always bouncing ideas off of each other. And working with this co-founder increases, it enhances your own thoughts because they bring in this other perspective. And secondly, there is a set of things that they are better at than you. And right now, AI is really good at completing, well-specified tasks. So in this model of just chatting with Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever it is, set up the conversation on like what the high-level project is, the big picture thing, not the task. Introduce it, and then just have conversation. Like, I'm thinking this. What do you think? Right? What should we do about? Really, just treating it as that partner. That's so powerful. And it gives every person, I think, that opportunity to have that co-founder who's aligned on the same mission, trying to make you succeed by making the product succeed that you're working on. That's got to be my favorite use case.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite use case as well. Something I'm using a lot is asking Copilot to ask me questions because
Yes.
I don't know what I don't know. So if I want to start, I don't know, preparing a podcast episode, I will ask him, okay, ask me a question until you understand enough so that you can help me. And I'm brainstorming with the AI. So I think it's my favorite as well.
I was just talking to a coworker about that model of having the reverse model of, instead of asking the AI questions and then coming back with an answer, say, here's the project. Like, you ask me questions and I'll answer what I can. And then we'll also realize what we don't know and what we need to go learn together. Is an awesome way of doing this. And it's a step function change in how you interact with AI. Like, it's one thing to ask a question and get an answer and treat it like a better search box, which it is that also. But have it change to enhance your thinking is a totally new additional thing that we can do now.
Yeah. And I mean, I think people forget that Copilot is an assistant. It's there to complement you, right? So you want him to challenge you. You want it to ask you a question because that's where you're using it. If you already know the answer, you won't use it at all, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
One of the favorite agents that I've built for myself was only 15 words of instructions, and it's basically the user's not interested in any positive feedback. Just give critical feedback. That's it. And sometimes it's hard to use because I'll write something and I'll think it's pretty good. I'll find a lot of things to do to improve it. Uh, but if I want the document to be good, it's a necessary step.
This one should be pretty, I will assume is really hard on Diego, right? You need to have
Yeah.
strong confidence to use it.
I named it brutal feedback because it can be brutal.
In one of your blog article, you mentioned that when you're creating an agent, you should focus on one specific role. I'm seeing so many organizations out there trying to build this jack of all trade agent, like this big agent that have access to everything and anything and is able to achieve pretty much every use case possible. And obviously, I'm telling them that's maybe not the best way to approach it, but you specifically mentioned to focus on one single role and then using multiple agents. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. Well, one aspect of this is the technology to make an AI be able to do anything is really not there. It's you can see demos of like narrow slices of this, and it seems like it's there, but it's not really there, especially when it's taking actions in software systems. Now we're getting closer, and an individual agent or set of instructions is getting more capable, but it's not really there yet. It can't just do all of the things that an organization does. So that's one part of this, and so that's why it's useful to split up into multiple agents. It's just the technology. But the other is, uh, the whole thing with AI in enterprises right now is around like usage and adoption. There's one thing to buy the licenses, but if you actually want huge change in your organization, it's changing how every person in the organization works. I just saw a study from early 2024 that found what 3% productivity gains so far from AI assistants at work, while meanwhile individuals, right, are absolutely seeing 30% productivity gains at work. From similar studies, but looking at specific individuals and their jobs versus the entire rollout. Right, so there's at least a 10x differential in those things right now. So one of the things that you can do to help is to model the AI after your current way of working. And having the agent as a role really helps with that. We call them agents. One of the reasons that we call them agents, and really the main reason, is to model them after real life people and workers. I've used a real estate agent in the past, and the real estate agent, right, it is very knowledgeable about real estate, and I can ask it real estate questions, and also, he does work for me. When I'm buying a house, right, he's finding the best listings and just driving me to them or showing them to me. So he's able to take those actions as well. So I know that when I've got a question about real estate, I've already got this pattern in my mind of, oh, I go talk to my real estate broker, my real estate agent about this thing. Because he's the expert. So if we can model the AI agent systems on this thing, right? Maybe we've got a privacy law expert, somebody that I talk to regularly as part of releasing these features or building and shipping these features. And so, they can't necessarily individually be replaced by this agent. We're certainly not there yet. But when I've got questions about privacy law, I can have an agent that is my privacy expert because I've already got that pattern in my mind of, oh, I go talk to this person about this set of topics. And if you can make that set of topics also an AI, then you can really expand how much of that work you can get done across your organization. So part of it's the technology, right? But the bigger part of it is the adoption and following, existing patterns of interacting with specialists.
And you speak a bit about adoption. My latest podcast episode was Katie Neep, and we were talking about adoption. And something I've seen is that people have a hard time to add this in their daily workflow, right? I mean, they have access to those agents that are being published by the organization. They have access to the agent builder, but still they don't use it because they don't build the muscle of using them. What will you suggest to someone that really want to be able to leverage those tools to be more productive, but don't know exactly where to start?
It's something that you've got to really be intentional about. So we've had technology changes in the past where it's just so easy to use, turn by turn navigation on a mobile phone, right? Like we already had the GPS, we kind of just changed the device. And so the training that you have to do is put your phone in a stand, right? Um, but this transition of AI is much more like, the transition from the typewriter to the word processor, or from, you know, physical written spreadsheets to Lotus 123 in Excel. Like you can't just give it to somebody and say, "All right, we're throwing away all of your paper and now you're using Excel." Like that isn't the world. Like we've had those technologies now for, well, the last 30 years of technological progress didn't really require that kind of new training. So I think it's, for anybody that wants to be more productive at their work and get more time for themselves, I think you should think about it more like we're learning word processors versus a typewriter. It's a new thing, it's a new way of working. Now, studies show that it takes about 10 hours of focused work, intentional focused training or work with AI in order to start using it more effectively and build it into your job. So that is what I recommend. Now, 10 hours is a lot of time, and I am the last person to go sit in 10 hours of mandatory training. I had to take some mandatory training last week. It was awful, and it was just 1 hour.
Same.
But the cool thing with this AI, though, right, is it's as you're learning to do it, it's helping you with your actual job, and it is going to be slower. As you're learning it, you can do it faster yourself than whatever the task is. But identify some of those tasks. Maybe you don't get the chance to write, multi-year strategy papers very often, right? So, and you weren't going to get time to do it, but take 10 hours, right? And really work with AI. Use the AI best practices, try it out, try to do it fully through AI. And you'll gain a sense of what it's really helping with, and where you are still needed. Right? It's not going to come up with your strategy for you, but maybe you're setting it up to ask you questions. Maybe you're setting it up to research or game theory and role play different scenarios. So there's lots of aspects of it that you can do with this. If you spend about 10 hours with it, you get a really good sense of what it can do and what it can't do. And then from there, you'll start recognizing what tasks you're doing that you can offload to AI or get AI assistance with. So that's a big commitment, 10 hours, right? I don't have 10 hours of mandatory training from Microsoft, most years. But it's a necessary one.
I love it. Actually, it will be a new slide in my slide deck about adoption. It's
Okay.
I really like it. I think something is that's a bit confusing for some our customer and user out there is that should they start with Copilot Chat, the paid version, creating an agent? And my opinion on that is depending on the level of understanding and what you need to do. If do you need to ground it on organizational data? Do you need somebody very, very specific with an agent, or are you just trying to do some research? But I like to have your take on it. Where should a user start?
If we think about just the last few years, of what, November 2022? Do I have that year right? When ChatGPT came out, there's really just been a few really groundbreaking new value added. So first, with the first release of ChatGPT, it's obviously it blew everyone's minds, right? But the new value there was kind of a just a chat partner, like a kind of a better version of like rubber duck debugging, where you explain the problem and that just in the rubber duck case you're just hearing yourself say it. But there's actually quite a bit of value in just conversation partner. This is kind of the first version of these scenarios. Not as much at work, although there's some value at work too, but a lot of value in the personal life. So that was the first really groundbreaking value. And frankly, I think that's probably driving most of ChatGPT adoption right now, just because that scenario is quite valuable. And that's great. The next scenario that we found really helpful, this really came with like Bing Chat. The first version of that is searching. researching, finding, gathering, summarizing information from the internet or from your enterprise data. That's kind of version 2, or step 2 of real AI value. Uh, and I think researcher. So I think there was a version of that with Bing Chat, and now there's a version of this with Researcher Agent that's available in Microsoft 365 Copilot, Deep Research, and ChatGPT. Gemini's got one, Perplexity's got one, where it's so well before, like if you could summarize, a particular answer. This next step with Researcher is creating an entire report. Now, this report generally, I find, is not something that you just send to your boss and say, I'm done, right? It's usually generally for your eyes only, right? Because it's not quite perfect, but it's really helping you. And it fully explains this topic in a lot of depth, which is great. So I think that's really the second value prop in Researcher, I think, is a more important part of that. So those are 2 awesome places to get started. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably use ChatGPT. So you've got that first scenario already covered. And the second one is a great place to get started, right? Use Researcher. Absolutely use Researcher. And so for whatever your questions are, I think that's probably what I'd recommend to do first at work. And if you haven't used ChatGPT, I guess go ahead and use that. So get access to Researcher. I think that's number 2. Now, the third, this is where there's a lot more work necessary, either from the organization, the IT department, or from makers or from end users to really figure out what are those other things that are specific to your business. And we've got, well, I don't know, like 400 of these case studies published of different organizations, companies, and software, whatever, that are using AI for a specific business process. Maybe it is summarizing hundreds of pages of research, right, in some particular domain. Maybe it's pharmaceuticals, maybe it's legal, or whatever it is. When you can identify those scenarios and build an agent for them, you are saving that business process time 95, 99% in some of these cases. There's lots of examples of those. Now, those do require planning and, projects. For organizations. Users can get a lot of this too, as they gain familiarity. But that's kind of what I would think of as the next step, right? Get everybody using Researcher is kind of what I would suggest. And then your data people use Analyst similarly. And then be thinking about what are these business processes, right, that lend themselves well to AI assistance. It's a lot of text, either consuming, summarizing, or producing, right? Those kinds of scenarios. It can be modeled after a particular job role that already exists, so it's easy to adopt. And there's oversight built into the organization about the output and the results. When you can find those scenarios, that's what you should use next. Build those scenarios and accelerate those processes by dozens or hundreds of times.
Love it. I think a Researcher Agent right now is part of the Frontier program.
That's right.
When will it be GA? Is it disclosed?
Well, if everything goes well, by the time you're listening to this podcast, you should be able to go to the Agent Store and find the Frontier Agent program right there, if your organization has allowed it. So crossing our fingers, because at the time of recording, we're not quite done, but by the time you listen to this, we should be there.
Awesome. Talking about agent, you mentioned in one of your articles, how important is it to craft thorough instruction and it really hit me when you said there's 8,000 characters there. Like, use them all if you can. And I realize our marketing team has done such a good job at, showing an example where you use this super simple and small instruction and you get awesome result. But it might work for some use cases. Honestly, I have some agent out there that doesn't have like big instruction, but obviously I found out by testing, like you mentioned, that the more you add clear instruction, providing example, defining the workflow, what you're expecting from the agent, the better the agent will be. So what are your best practices for creating instruction?
Well, first I'll say, most agents I build are not using 8,000 characters of instructions. Most of them use a couple hundred. And that is it because there's like some particular task that I want help with right now, or it's just short term, or just a couple of people need it. And I'm willing to work around it by continuing to prompt. So not all of my agents do I go through all of that work. But for the important ones, that is a good idea, is to use all of the space that we give you for the instructions. Custom GPTs and ChatGPT and Copilot agents both give 8,000 characters for instructions. And well, first I'll say, if other people are going to be using this agent, it's a form of software development. If it's going to be handling an important business process that you were, spending time on, and many people were spending time on, and was fairly expensive, therefore, like, this is a software project. Now, it's a really easy one because anybody can type it in. Anybody can learn these best practices. So yes, certainly fill in, use all of the space available. What works really well is, use Markdown or XML, or even just capital letters, frankly, to separate things into sections. So first you want to start off with why does this agent exist? What is it? What is its purpose? What is it for? Just a super high level. For many business processes, there's several steps that need to happen approximately in order. And the great thing about agents is that they can happen out of order, and you can handle edge cases and things that change. But frequently, a list of steps to go through for this process is the next thing to include in agent instructions. Then, yes, as you mentioned, examples, right? Just say user : prompt, and then agent : prompt. And that's all that you need for some of these. And that really, once you write down what you expect to happen, this clarifies in your mind first. Like, that's the first thing, so that you're actually clear about what you mean. But it also helps the model if you can give a few examples. And then finally, leave space for other things that you forgot to specify in the other sections. As you test it, and you have to test this because it's software that people will be using for important business processes, issues that you see come up, right? When you get into this situation, I want you to do this kind of thing. So that's the basic outline of instructions. If you've got more space, go ahead and add more examples. They're only going to help. But the other part of this, and this part is just as important, is figuring out what information to ground the agent in. Now, this is going to vary. Not all agents need grounding information or custom actions, but many do. You want to be really intentional about this. If you just start putting in hundreds of pages of unrelated information, it will be worse. The agent will get worse if you include bad information. But if you include good information, the agent quality can go way up. So you can include up to something like 200 pages, 100,000 characters of other knowledge grounding right now by pointing it at individual files in OneDrive or SharePoint, or by pointing directly to them. So be really intentional about what those are. You can also set up the agent to search, entire SharePoint sites or the internet. And this is a different model because the model doesn't automatically have access to all of that, right? It's got to go search for it, and it's not always going to find it. So think about those two tiers of knowledge: what you want to embed by directly specifying the file, and what you want to search. And think about them separately, and how the AI is going to access these. Finally, you add the custom actions, right? The capabilities. The capabilities are just check marks. If you want to use code interpreter, that's usually a good idea most of the time. Or image generation is useful in some circumstances. Then a Copilot Studio or professional development tools, you can add custom actions like MCP servers, or OpenAPI specifications, or message extensions, or basically any kind of way that you can access the software system. So I'll include those and describe them for the agent in the instructions where it's going to be necessary for this process. That's kind of the overall rundown of these things. the other advice I'll give is think about what the users are going to prompt. Right? When you treat this like a person, like a role, right? How is the user going to structure their question? How do they structure it today when they're asking, these kinds of questions? Um, was that how do we test those, right? But also include those kinds of things in your examples. Make sure that they're going to be handled well.
That's a super good framework to follow. You just mentioned you can ground it on either a SharePoint site or on a specific document. I got the feedback a lot that the experience is a bit different. The output is a bit different if you point it to a whole SharePoint site versus like individual documents. And I will assume that the architecture is a bit different in the background, but can you explain why?
Sure. Yeah, and we just put out a documentation article on this because it's not very intuitive. And we're working on more product improvements to make this more straightforward for users. So the way that language models work, this is going to be a little bit technical, but it won't be too bad, so don't worry too much. The way that they work is you give them a whole bunch of text, and then they predict the next thing that would go into this text, right? So with base models, which we're not really using here, right? But you could say, that the sly fox jumped over the lazy, right? Give that to the model, and it would immediately return dog with 99% confidence, because that is the word that almost always follows here. So in chat and instruction models, it's more complicated than that. So what OpenAI learned with ChatGPT was the breakthrough. It was this instruction following, which is if you organize this text as a conversation, like a play, for instance, right, a 2-character play, the first user says this, user or character A says this, character B says this, character A says this, character B says, and you leave it there, the model will fill in an incredibly intelligent answer of what character B would have said at this time. And this was the emergent behavior, that was talked about, in the literature at this time, because nobody predicted that this would happen. And that conversation between characters A and B can be a translation, right? And it can be instructions of, this is a translation kind of conversation. And, character A will say something in English and character B will say something in Spanish and then English. And then you prompt the model and it will translate whatever that was incredibly, just because the AI is effectively magic. Just when it got large enough. Okay, so the way that this works is only based on the information that's in this conversation. And so the way that, and it scales poorly. While the models are getting better at this, the top models often are limited to 128,000 letters or characters in this conversation before they can't process anymore. So when you include 20,000 characters of really useful information, it bases the completion of the next thing it's going to say on all of that information existing. And that's why embedding this knowledge works really well, but it's limited. You can only get 128,000 characters in there. You still need to get the user's question and the conversation history and the guidelines and everything like that, so it's limited. And we limit it to about 100,000 characters right now. Meanwhile, all of Wikipedia, right, is 72 gigabytes of text only. That's a lot bigger than 100,000 characters. And, we can't just put all of it into the context window and then ask questions. It just doesn't fit. We don't have enough computing power in the world, or perhaps in the universe, to do so with this AI architecture. So the workaround is called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation, where the model basically asks for more information. Like, I can't answer that unless I go get this information over there. And our product code, or what we call the orchestrator, sees, oh, the model has asked for this question. Let me go with not AI and just go get that information, right? Maybe it's go get the article Mary Queen of Scots, I don't know, whatever it is from Wikipedia, and put its into the context now. because it's pretty small. That's only 5,000 characters. We can put it here into the model, and now the AI is going to be great at answering questions about Mary Queen of Scots. Um, but if our code, or if the model, if that article is actually, I should know this history better, I don't know, Mary the Second Queen of England or something like that, and it doesn't show up with the query Mary Queen of Scots, I should probably say Scotland at least. Sorry, UK listeners. Uh, we might not get it. We might get the wrong article, and then the AI is not going to help. Or the article might be, 60 pages long and will only grab a couple paragraphs out of it. And it won't be able to answer based on the full context. So, when you can, select individual high quality files in your agent, and you're aligned well with how the technology works to get much better answers out of them.
So if I'm pointing it to a whole SharePoint site, there's the risk that it will pick up the wrong information and pass it as context to the agent, and then I'll get a bad answer. While if I'm specifying specific documents on any subject, it will be more precise in this answer because the chances that it will extract wrong information from it are less, right?
That's right. Yeah, there's two issues with searching, broad forums, and we're of course, handling this as best as we can. One part is, just getting the right information, and then also when you get the wrong information, it makes the model worse, right? So if you've been using the same SharePoint site for 17 different projects for 10 years, it's going to have a lot of information in there that's not helpful for what the user's current question is and what this agent is supposed to be doing. Now, it does make a good fallback option, right? So you can do both. You can specify individual high quality files and also say, if these qualities, not even say, right, but just set up the agent for, if these files don't have that information, you do have the ability to search. So you can set up both, and you probably should, right? But for important agents, think about what those knowledge sources are, right? Make sure they're set up well and treat them seriously. Right? It's part of the software, frankly, like what that document is.
So for all the organization out there that ask me, I have this 10,000 document repository. Can I just plug the AI on it and ask any question? It's not a good idea.
You cannot. No, and no, anybody that tells you that transformers and LLMs can do that will be wrong. That's actually a search problem. Now, AI in agentic search is helpful. Right? It can do multiple searches, it can reason over it, and it is getting better. And so it is going to be better than just a straight, lexical or semantic search on that entire SharePoint site, especially if you use Researcher for it, because it can do a lot of searching. But the AI it simply cannot process 10,000 documents at once. Not Gemini, not ChatGPT. Nobody's AI can process 10,000 documents. It is a search problem.
Changing subject, but you mentioned in one of your article that the agents you're creating should be opinionated, right? Should represent your specific way of seeing a challenge or seeing your work, right? Why is that? And how will you recommend people out there to create their agent based on this idea?
Yeah. The naive way to use AI is to give it, write a sonnet about, SharePoint search, right? Do something like that. And it will correctly write a sonnet. It'll use whatever 17-line form is necessary. But it's also not going to be that good, right? Because there's a lot of things that you could say about SharePoint search. Many of them probably don't fit very well in a sonnet. But anyway, and the overuse of this, and this is even worse when there's little buttons with magic wands on them. I really wanted to get the feedback to the LinkedIn team. I really don't like the auto-generated answers that everybody just clicks on for giving LinkedIn comments. And it produces just very generic, technically accurate, correctly punctuated, sure, yes, correct English, very modern, correct English, but very generic, boring content. I was really hoping
with a rocket. They all have a rocket. When you're creating a LinkedIn post with the magic one.
The blowing mind emoji and the rocket emoji for sure. And it's so tedious. I was hoping the word pablum would take off. For it's a very boring cereal that nobody eats anymore. But the term that actually took off is AI slop, right? Where the mental image is just scooping in a big thing and just putting it on the cafeteria tray or the pig trough. It's not appetizing. It's technically food, but nobody wants it. Um, so that's the generic. If you aren't giving more information about this, I think the example that I might have used in that one was answer this question, in a few paragraphs, but also pretend that there is a tiny Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur that is on your counter and is trying to make coffee and needs your help as you answer. Um, Turned a very generic answer into whatever I was asking into a hilarious essay. About he's knocked over the coffee pot now or whatever. Uh, so that's probably not useful at work necessarily to put your quarter end financials being interrupted by a T-Rex, perhaps. But that's if you make it opinionated, you're going to avoid that AI slop. And also, if you are developing software for sale, right, or that you want to take off, you can anybody can produce the slop, right? They'll reverse engineer your prompt or whatever, and they'll produce the same product. And they might out hustle you or out distribute you or something like that, but there's no moat. What you can do is have taste. Like, we're using this Riverside recording software right now, which looks very different from Teams and from Zoom. And, it's very clearly intentionally thought about for the needs of interviewing somebody on video. And, it's not generic. Like, if you asked AI, make a video recording app with two people, like, it would not produce this application. Um, the Riverside designers and product managers and engineers might have thought very intentionally about what this experience should be, using their expertise of, producing videos, and made a product exactly for that. They might have used AI assistants in it, right? But they gave a lot of detail. They were very opinionated. We need these features and not those ones, and it's going to look like this. So as you're building software, you and agents in particular, but any AI software, right? Be opinionated, right? If your opinion is different than others, your software will, resonate with some category of users. That's how you'll grow fans, and that's your moat. Your moat is actually the taste, because it's so easy to build stuff now. So apply your opinions to your AI.
I'm often hearing this joke of, all these email will be crafted by AI and then everybody will use it to AI to summarize those long emails. But at some point, I'm personally using it a lot to craft emails. You can hear from my accent, like English not my primary languages. And I wasn't posting a lot on LinkedIn because it was tedious for me to look at my grammar, my punctuation, all this stuff. And now with AI, I have the opportunity of crafting better email, of crafting cool LinkedIn posts, but I just don't use the magic wand, like I mentioned. I'm not using the out of the box Copilot for Outlook generated email. I'm putting my idea out there, and I'm telling which tone to use, and I'm putting my twist to it. And
yes.
I know a lot of people won't necessarily agree that because we'll say, no, you're not the creator of those, of those texts, of those LinkedIn posts. But I think that the work that's been put inside of the prompt and giving my twist, and most of the time I am iterating, right? I'm not just like taking it like it is. I will do some modification, etc.
Yeah.
I make it my own, right?
That is, a great use case here, right? That the bad version of this is, you write 3 bullet points and you have AI expand it into 3, formal paragraphs. And because the AI doesn't have any information to go on besides what you wrote in the bullet points, the rest of it is slop, right? The actual information was in those 3 bullet points, and then I just added lots of filler words. So that is the kind of the bad version of this. But I use AI in my writing all the time, not to do the writing necessarily, right? But to certainly research, to rewrite, to identify problems, to find places that aren't clear, to give suggestions of what I could write next. There's a huge amount of value in doing that for writing. Just be careful that you are the one adding the ideas. Not the AI, because the AI will give the most boring, average, generic ideas. And that's just how it's built, right? The whole thing, this live fox jumped over the lazy blank, right? It's not going to say octopus or zeppelin, right? It's going to give the average answer of dog, because that is precisely what it's set up to do. And if you think about that in the rest of your writing, what the AI is going to tell you is the most average version of it. Now, AI can actually be very creative. If you ask for 20 versions of it, it's going to give them to you, and some of them will be hilarious, and those can be really fun to do as well. But so definitely be using AI in your writing. But if you just clicked on a button, be a little skeptical of the quality of that answer.
I'm seeing so many answers on LinkedIn posts that are clearly AI generated, super generic, using all the same words, same emojis. Yeah.
Twitter is just as bad. You can always spot them basically restating the question, or the guy's post in slightly different words, and then maybe asking a generic question. They're all over the internet, unfortunately. Um, what's crazy is it's so easy to be more interesting, even if you're using AI to automate posting, which you probably also shouldn't do. But you could make it way more interesting, and most people don't. So anyway, it's still super easy to tell everybody that's doing that.
I think we'll come with solutions to prevent that at some point. I mean, LinkedIn will improve its algorithm.
Yeah,
Like,
I just saw a study of there's starting to be some stigma of using AI for writing, which is unfortunate because AI is such a great tool for writing when you're using it well. And also, I can understand some stigma if you're using AI poorly. If you're clicking on the magic wand buttons and just posting it without adding any original thought, yeah, you maybe should feel bad about wasting everybody's time with that just a little.
a lot of feedback I heard about Copilot or AI in general, or generative AI actually in general, is mostly people don't taking the time to understand how it works and thinking that the magic wand is what generative AI is, right? I can put like a 3-4 words question and it will give me this awesome output that will change my life and will save me 4 hours, but it's not the case, right?
And consume 50,000 gallons of water to do it, right?
Yeah.
That is the other complaint, which is false, by the way. I won't get into that. That's totally true. And even if you're listening to this, if you used AI a year ago, well, first off, if you've got that experience of, it did a couple of toy things. There was actually really cool stuff it could do a year ago. But the latest frontier models, they are so incredible. If it's been 12 months, you absolutely need to go back and look at them. Now, you are listening to a podcast about Copilot, so maybe you don't necessarily need to be told this, but try research or an analyst, right? The reasoning models from Microsoft 365 Copilot. Try Think Deeper in Microsoft Copilot. Try Researcher in ChatGPT, whatever Gemini and Perplexity's versions of these things are with the frontier models. I buy the pro or the plus subscription for ChatGPT every few months, to see how it's progressed and how it's being used. I did this in April, and the O3 model is so incredible. Maybe you've seen memes of you show it an image, right? It says you could say GeoGuess this, and it will inspect the plants or I don't even know what it's doing, like the type of rock that it is, and then get you down to about a 15-mile square area. That's what it is. I did this, looking at a rock in my neighborhood, and it's like, oh, those are Western sword ferns. Oh, that siding looks like it's, very Pacific Northwest. All right, so we're in the Pacific Northwest. Now I see a slope on the hill, so you're probably not. Well, first off, this is a residential suburb area. We're not in the Snoqualmie Valley. You got to be a little bit farther east. I bet you're in the Cascade foothills. And then it gave a couple of towns that I live next to. I just took a picture of a rock. Anyway, O3 can do that about anything. Not GeoGuess images, right? But anything that you want to do. It's really astounding, and you owe it to yourself to give it another chance. Researcher in Microsoft 365 Copilot also uses O3, so that's a great place to get going with it if you've got the license. Otherwise, you got to pay the $20. Sorry, give it to Microsoft's competitor. You got to pay the $20 and try it out. Um, or let's plug consumer Microsoft Copilot. Get Copilot Pro at least, and try out those things in your daily life, whether it's groceries and meal planning. Everybody always jokes about travel scenarios being overused, but just whatever your work is, tips on managing your toddler's tantrum, whatever. Like it'll research it, it'll give you suggestions. You definitely need to check out AI again if it's been a little while.
The pace of innovation is just crazy, and it's so funny you talked about this geolocalization or geo searching, because I found a video yesterday of a YouTuber doing that, and I'm just thinking he might be using AI finally, where he challenged anyone in the world to take a picture, and it will tell them exactly where they are, and probably he's using AI.
Well, so those geoguessers were doing it before O3. Maybe he is now, but they were very impressive last year too. Just unbelievable stuff that some people can do there. But now AI can. That guy's out of a job. Uh,
Yeah, true. I think you will continue to have his audience.
yeah.
How many agents are you using?
I probably have 40 or 50 agents installed for myself. Uh, and I use them variously. Some of these are because I am testing out the features that we are building. So some of them are certainly that. They're not necessarily daily use agents. I get a lot of use out of my critical feedback agent for sure. I get a lot of use out of agents that act like my bosses or peers that review my documents, and I can have the agent review the document first. Really saves me a whole lot of time doing that. I've got other agents that help me specifically with writing, like strategy documents or something like that. Make sure that these things are laid out correctly and making the right points. And also, I can standardize that by creating an agent for them, and then just other stuff that come up. It's so easy to make agents in Agent Builder and Microsoft 365 Copilot. It only takes a few extra seconds beyond prompting, and then I can share it with somebody. The other things that I try, I've got an agent that asks me questions. I demand that it asks me several questions until it completely understands what I'm trying to ask and then answer. And I find that often gives me better answers, if it does take a little bit more time to use. So I've got maybe a dozen that I use pretty regularly. Certainly, I get a lot of use out of Researcher. I've mentioned that multiple times here, but I'm very excited about it for sure. That is a good one. Then a lot of these are just pretty standard for me. And then Microsoft has agents as well that help out with specific Microsoft processes. So these ones are just easier than whatever other system that we had. So those ones are always great, but I only need to order, a new computer every few years. So I don't interact with those that often.
Yeah, I do agree with the researcher one. I mean, I'm using it almost daily. It's crazy good. I mean, to be honest, prior to the researcher agent, I was using Perplexity because it was really good at researching using a reasoning model, etc. But now that I have researcher, it's not only searching the web, it's searching my organizational data. So if I need to prepare for a specific customer, I can look at all my transcription, all my email, and it's really, really, really good. I'm really totally impressed by the researcher agent. It's very powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I'll use it just for a single word answer, just because it's so good at searching, even if I do feel a little bit bad.
Can it provide single word? Can it provide single word answer?
No, it can't. But the answer will be somewhere in that report.
Okay.
If I simply cannot find it and I can't work with Copilot and prompt it to find it, it'll be like, all right, I'll ask a researcher, I'll come back in 10 minutes, and then I'll scan through it and find that answer for that name or that project that I was looking for. It's very good at that.
In one of your article, you were mentioning starting sometimes building the plan of what you want to execute with GPT-4o, for instance, and then asking to O3 to expand on that plan. And because one GPT-4o is faster than O3. Now I can see the same with using standard Copilot and then the researcher.
Totally. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Um, this is actually just a pattern that I think more people should be using of multiple agents in one conversation. When we designed and built, these agents in Microsoft 365 Copilot, we were pretty intentional. Other platforms weren't doing this. Like ChatGPT, you couldn't do this at the time. In ChatGPT, you would open up the custom GPT and you would interact with it, and then you'd be done and you'd close the conversation and you start a new conversation. What we wanted to do was recognize that in order for you to complete like a large project, there's a lot of roles that you're going to interact with. As I work on shipping researcher capabilities, to the world, I mentioned privacy earlier, right? So privacy experts are one of them, but security experts is, another person that I work with, the responsible AI people, our deployment safety board. Like there's several different people that I want to work with in order to, just get the full gamut of reviews, of the compliance reviews of this feature. So all of that's the same project, and it's all related. And if I go interact with each of these people individually, or with each of these agents individually, I've got to repeat all of the context of what I'm doing and what I've already just worked out with the privacy expert, so that the responsible AI expert can know it. So anyway, most work is like this, right? Your boss assigns you a project, you work on that project for, days, weeks, months, and if you keep that conversation going, you don't have to keep repeating yourself. You're going to start getting better answers. And you can bring in specialist agents for individual pieces of it as necessary. And they've all got the context of the whole conversation. So that is a very helpful pattern of working across many agents, is keeping the conversation going and having all of that history. So totally recommend it.
I'm seeing time's flying. I prepared like 14 questions. We're at number 5. Also, the question I asked you just came naturally. Almost like I can talk to you for hours. It's really interesting to see how you address it, how you add it to your daily workflow. But for my last question, I'd like to know, where do you see that evolving? How do you see Copilot evolving or agent evolving in 5 years? It seems like
5
a
years.
lot in
Yeah.
our world.
Well, what's really interesting in this enterprise space is the technology is moving so fast, but enterprises take time. And certainly I've seen this for the previous AI features that I've worked on before this. Adoption is going to take time. Now, this, I think, is going to be adopted, and this is already being adopted faster than any technology in history. But still, it's going to take some time. So 5 years in AI progress is really going to be incredible. We kind of hit the limit on pre-training scale, right? GPT 4.5 was kind of the last one for pre-training scale, but OpenAI discovered inference time scale and these reasoning models, and there's so much more headroom there. So there's a clear path for continued model improvements for at least a couple of years. And if it's anything like the last couple of years, it's hard to predict what even those things are. So the technology is going to keep moving fast. I think what I can predict is certainly in 5 years, the enterprises that are working hard to adopt now are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of their enterprises that are not and have not been working for the last couple of years to adopt this. Because if you don't start until 2030, it's going to be too late, right? Your competitors, they'll be 30%, 50%, 100% more productive than you, which means, they are getting so much more done. They're going to be out shipping, out distributing, outselling you at every corner for whatever your business is. So what the individual work looks like, everybody's going to have to be using personal AI assistants. Um, because their peers are just going to be so much more successful with it than they are if they're not using it. So everybody's going to be using this. So I think this advice goes to individuals too. Like, put in those 10 hours. You're going to be way ahead. There might be new things to learn next year. There's almost certainly going to be new things to learn next year. AI is going to keep getting better. You'll be able to use it for more things. But you're going to be so far ahead of, I'll say, if you're not using AI and you're not learning about it now, you're going to be so far behind in 1 year, certainly 5 years. It's going to be hard to compete at that time.
Yeah, and it's a muscle that need to be built in the sense that people don't add up AI day one. So if you're waiting too long, you'll have to start from scratch. If you start in 2030, you'll start. Yeah, I mean the curve of adoption will take a year or two. And you'll be really behind. I agree. But
Yes.
how do you keep? Sorry, it was my last question, but this is the last question. How do you
Okay.
keep with the pace of innovation?
I work a lot. Is probably probably the main answer here. And when I'm not working, I am learning. You know, it- as as uh, as many complaints as we can have about X or Twitter and its current owner, it remains the best place to learn what's going on, like what people are finding is working in AI, what the latest papers are, what the trends are, what the latest tools are to try. And so on weekends, I'll try out the new tools too. So I spend several hours a week scrolling. I research for my newsletter, some of these new tools that are available. I work a lot. It's kind of the answer. Maybe that's not great for everybody. Um, it is what it is. It takes a lot of work to stay up to date.
Yeah, I'm the same spot trying to just keep on. Awesome. Thank you so much for this discussion. It's been super insightful. If people want to hear more of you, you have a blog, you have
Right?
a podcast, you have a newsletter, you're active on LinkedIn, on Twitter. So
Yes,
there's
those
a
those
lot
are
of
the
places
main
to follow.
ones.
Am I missing some or?
No, that's it. I've also got Mastodon and Threads installed, but I don't use those. So yeah.
Awesome. I'll put all those links inside the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today, and maybe a part two. I don't know. I can continue asking you questions for hours, but thank you.
It's my pleasure, Samuel. Had a lot of fun chatting with you today.
Great. Take care.
Bye.
That's it for today. Big thanks to Abram for the conversation. I got a ton out of it, and I hope you did too. If you're enjoying the show, the best way to support it is just to hit subscribe and share it with someone who's also trying to figure out how to actually use AI, not just talk about it. And if you want more, I've got a newsletter on Substack, Mastering AI for Productivity. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next one.